Hello and welcome to The Bottom Line here on TVP World, where we bring you the best of the business and economic stories of the day. I'm your host, Marie Casio. The Polish government is facing a scandal and questions regarding the alleged misuse of the recovery funds, a special pot of EU money designed to give the European economy a post-pandemic jolt. So what went wrong? Konrad Gorlinski tells us more in his report.
The Polish government has been in crisis management mode following recent revelations that some companies in the HoReCa sector, that's hotels, restaurants, and catering, used funds from the EU's recovery funds for purchases like company yachts, interior renovations, and even a virtual shooting range. None of these, critics say, match the program's stated goal of supporting innovation and long-term competitiveness. Heads have already rolled, and Poland's Deputy Minister of Funds and Regional Policy, Ian Szyszko, announced an audit into the agency responsible for overseeing applications for the program.
The
Polish Agency for Enterprise Development ought to closely examine whether the operators who convened the expert panels that selected the beneficiaries and selected the applications met their obligations.
The issue has quickly grown partisan, as the previous government had these funds frozen by the EU due to rule of law issues. The current government managed to unlock them.
You know why they'll keep bringing this up? Because they knew very well how big of a success it was to unlock the national recovery funds. How difficult it was, and the effort it required. Despite the disasters that law and justice had caused over the years, and the fact that it's in their interest to try to discredit and attack us, they have unfortunately been given a small pretext to do so.
So how small is the pretext, really? How much money are we talking about here? The total amount of the National Recovery Program funds that Poland can tap is 15.75 billion euros. Irregularities thus far have only been found within the HoReCa sector, which was allocated around 350 million euros, which is 0.5% of the total funds. Only 25 million have been spent thus far. The National Reconstruction Plan for the HoReCa industry was initially negotiated years ago to help the tourism and catering sectors recover from the COVID pandemic. But as political disputes between Warsaw's previous government and Brussels had the funds frozen for years, they had not been made available until now. Consequently, purchases like yachts, shooting ranges, and renovations made sense for the sector then, but now, 2 years on, they might seem rather inappropriate.
And
here lies the biggest problem, that politicians wanted to spend the money from the National Recovery Program at all costs, because any changes in the allocation of these funds had to be consulted with Brussels. And the time we have as a country to spend this money is already very short.
Recovery funds must be spent within a limited time frame. Due to the slip-up, the government decided to relax the application criteria. The HoReCa Association in Poland has already said that it criticized the rulebook of the program. Donald Tusk also said he expects the minister responsible to provide an explanation at Tuesday's government session.
However, we can expect a detailed audit from OLAF, the supervisory body that monitors the spending of funds at the European Union level. And then there are these irregularities. If they are confirmed, we may be forced to return these funds to Brussels.
The acting president of the Polish Agency for Enterprise Development, Krzysztof Gulda, has said that preliminary findings of ongoing audits can be expected as soon as late September. Until then, the key question is whether the HoReCa program should have been rolled out at all.
The government gets access to a significant amount of EU money and wants to spend it quickly, so it relaxes the requirements as to how the funds can be applied for, and it backfires in a spectacular fashion. To talk about the details, I'm pleased to welcome Łukasz Bernatowicz, Deputy President of the Management Board at the Business Centre Club. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
So the recovery funds, it's pretty self-explanatory in what it is supposed to support, that post-COVID recovery and the future resilience should another crisis like COVID actually occur. So how is it possible that so many, hundreds, perhaps we're looking at thousands, of ridiculous applications were considered eligible for local businesses?
I'm afraid it's the result of the delay of the negotiations of the whole package, which started in 2021 and was finished in June 2022. So I would like to underline that it was during the former government, and nevertheless, the funds were not accessible for Polish entrepreneurs due to the political issues, which we were not responsible for as entrepreneurs. When the new government took office, they tried what was said before to speed up the whole procedure due to the issue that the deadline to finish all these spendings is in next year. So again, the problem was the time for spending the money, and in order to not be obliged to return these funds, which would be a disaster for a Polish economy, and from the political view also, the government made the applications very easy to get through. And the effects are now, because there is always some people that will take advantage of this possibility. You have 99% of honest entrepreneurs and 1% of people who just taking advantage for easy money.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the lack of time versus the previous government is the result of the businesses or the entrepreneurs or pseudo-entrepreneurs that have applied for the funding that they have actually received.
Exactly. Please note that other governments in European Union started to spend this money in 2022. We started 2 years later, so that makes our position very hard in order to be able to spend this money in time. And the other issue is the lack of proper control, and this lies on the side of the new government. That should be also underlined.
So I just wanted to
procedure of negotiation.
I just wanted to move on to precisely that transparency issue. So we hear that many companies have received the funding to set up companies from scratch. So these companies didn't actually exist before the pandemic, and they didn't actually exist during the pandemic. So they couldn't have actually lost 30% or 20% of their revenue, which was one of the conditions to actually receive this funding. But we hear that the Minister for Development Funds and Regional Policy, Katarzyna Pełczyńska-Nałęcz, comes across as though everything is in order, claiming that the Polish government is very well rehearsed in managing EU funds. And in this recent case, companies had to actually prove that they had lost 30% of their revenues in the first round. And in the second round of applications, they had to prove that they had lost 20% of revenues. So can you just give us a little bit of your insight or your opinion as to this lack of clarity and transparency? Because these funds were for companies that had actually lost revenue as opposed to wanting to set up new companies right now.
Yeah, it was at least 30% of the annual income, which was, if you had this income decreased by 30%, then you were allowed to apply for this money. And again, due to the lack of time, proper time to spend this money, the government and all officials didn't want to be in a position when Poland will have to return these assets to European Commission. And due to that fact, the control level was less than usually proper, and that was used, taken advantage by these entrepreneurs who are, I would like to be very frank, who are dishonest simply, and they should be very carefully examined how the procedure was carried on, why the companies were established after the deadline which was described in the procedure. And unfortunately, that leads us to the situation when also the European Union officials will examine the situation, not only Polish prosecutors or Polish Ministry of European Funds, but also Olaf and other European officials will take a close watch on what was going on here, and that is a very bad reputation.
So basically, we're looking at a situation where red tape was dropped, in order to not lose these funds, or a loan essentially, because this is a loan, from the EU. And essentially money was distributed. And now this has backfired. So essentially, are we in a situation where we do need this red tape? We need this control in order to make sure that these funds are not misused.
I'm afraid we need that, but I'm even more afraid that if this will result in stopping the whole program, that would be very bad news for our economy and these entrepreneurs, who are allowed to spend this money. So I hope that this will not end in a situation when we full stop the whole program in order to examine these several issues that in percentage, this is 0.5% of the whole stock of money, so it's not very much. However, of course, every euro should be spent properly. So from the one point of view, we should, of course, have full transparency in spending this money. On the other hand, this situation should not affect all the other 99% of entrepreneurs who are spending this money correctly and transparently.
How did the applicants justify setting up new businesses alongside their ongoing businesses that were completely unrelated, like the yachts, the Sunbeds, and the pizzerias? We hear that the Hoteliers Association here in Poland advised the government that having a Sunbed would be more business savvy for a pizzeria than, for instance, adding a bakery to a pizzeria. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, each case should be examined separately, because we have now a PR situation which shows that the government spent the money from European Union, for which they applied very strongly in wrong procedures. On the other hand, each case should be examined separately, because some of these cases, which we now hear, that are yachts bought by restaurants and hotels, and as you said, Sunbeds bought by pizzerias. Each case can be justified, even if it looks ridiculous right now from our point of view. But perhaps there is justification, and this procedure will be defending itself. But in order to be sure that the remaining part of the huge amount of money which Poland achieved by the retrieving program is spent correctly, we should examine each of these cases and be sure that everything is okay. Otherwise, the whole program will be jeopardized by this situation.
And who will be held responsible for this? It's probably difficult to say right now, but in your sort of business assessment, who do you think will be responsible for this? And how soon can we expect to see a proper audit, especially from the government point of view?
I don't want to point anyone responsible. It's not my job to do that. That is for the prosecutors to do. I hope that it will go very smoothly and fast in order to keep our economy safe. And at the same time, I'm afraid that it will take many weeks. We have middle of vacation season right now. So I think that if it ends by the end of September, that will be a good result. And hopefully for that time, the whole procedure will be not stopped for all the other entrepreneurs who need this money in order to prepare for other black swans situation. And it should be also underlined that the majority of this money has been spent very sufficiently and efficiently. We are investing in digitalization. We are investing in robotization of our economy. We are investing in energy, in transition lines, in railways, in roads. And this huge amount of money is in progress of investment, and that should be kept alive. So I can only urge the officials, the government and the ministry to examine the wrong cases, but not hurting these entrepreneurs who are spending this money correctly.
Yeah, the honest ones. Do you think that Katarzyna Pełczyńska-Nałęcz will have to go?
No, I don't want to go into that. We are a business organization and we do not involve ourselves in politics. I hope that smart and wise decision will be made and that the entrepreneurs will not suffer from this situation.
Sure. Do you think that other recovery fund programs will be in question? I mean, obviously, you say that other EU funding is being used very well, but do you think that other funding is now going to be questioned in terms of, well, basically, is Poland's use of EU funding going to be questioned?
No, I don't think so. I think that our reputation as a country who spent during many years EU funds very properly and efficiently will protect us from this situation, and that is only one case that happened during many years, and that will result in a small damage.
Okay. Can the government boast of any other bigger mainstream investments for greater public good? And I'm asking this in the context of these recovery funds that have been allocated to Poland. Something to counterbalance this scandal right now.
Well, I hope so. I hope there is a plan for recovery from this situation, because it's very bad from the public relation point of view, which is very important as well for every government, and especially for this one who was criticizing a lot the former government due to the reason that we were not able to use these funds because the former government was struggling with the European Commission in terms of courts and prosecutors and so on. And this government presented itself as the one that will secure this money for Poland. And now once the money is here, that's a fact, nobody disputes that, but we see that they are not spent correctly. So this is a very serious problem for this government, and I hope that they have a plan to recovery from this situation for the benefit of all of us.
Indeed. Recover from the recovery funds. There are some mainstream opinion makers who believe that this ongoing scandal is really a storm in a teacup, and that regardless of all this current upheaval, the benefits of the recovery funds are way beyond any scandal or any lack of transparency that we are looking at. Apparently, it's only 1,500 applications, 110 million zloty. After all, the hotel, restaurateur and catering industries are purchasing allegedly everything that they need. They need the coffee machines, they need the yachts, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
I fully agree. It is a storm in a teacup, and from this point of view, of course, we should move on and just draw some consequences from this situation, but water under the bridge. From the other point of view, of course, I agree with those who say that each euro should be used properly. So this is the toughest issue in this whole case, to, from one side, examine the situation and draw consequences towards them who are responsible. On the other hand, not make the remaining economy sectors suffer from this situation, not stop this whole program, because our economy is using it very good and very efficiently, and that should not be stopped by this situation, which should be, of course, examined. And I hope that also the European official agencies, which will now examine the situation, will not demand from our government to put a stop on the whole procedure of spending those money for the time of the examination.
Okay, Łukasz Bernatowicz, Deputy President of the Management Board at the Business Centre Club. Thank you very much for giving us some insight on this issue.
Thank you.
And that concludes The Bottom Line for today. I was your host, Marie Cato. We bring you the best of regional business Monday to Friday at 5:10 CET on TVP World. And in the meantime, for the latest in regional business, follow us on X and on tvpworld.com. Goodbye.